All right, nice group. Thank you all for being here today and prioritizing this really important talk. Um, so I just wanted, before we get started, to acknowledge that the intention behind what we're doing and this work, that we not only hope to cultivate and really ingrain in the StudioBE culture, but also in making conscious decisions as we invite in leadership and really diversify not only our team, but also our platform, our content, our signature series, making sure that everything we do is informed with radical inclusivity. And I think that the last few weeks and the last few months, of course, have been so challenging in so many ways. And I'm also feeling so incredibly grateful for the experiences that are here right now. Because it gives us such a great opportunity to do the inner work that needs to be done and create this new world that we hope for not only us, but most importantly for our kids, for the next generation, so that this suffering doesn't continue and continue and continue. And it starts here with honest conversations like this. And luckily we have leadership, and there's Ty, like Ty, that we could really lean into to support us as we go through this inner transformation. So thank you all for being here and prioritizing this time today with Ty. And I'm just going to hand it over to you, Ty. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Thank everyone for being here. So I can't see everyone, but yeah, I guess I could just scroll through. But anyway, so let's get started right away. I have 3 different things I'm going to have you watch, and then I'm going to open it up a little bit after that. I'll say a few things and then open it up to questions, given what I do say. Okay? So let's begin. Do we have that queued up and ready?
Yeah.
We do.
I'll get us going.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. It's nice to see you. I have everything all set up. Do you want, Ty, would you like them just back to back, no breaks between?
Maybe just a moment between to kind of take it in.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. And Sarah, maybe, can you hear me?
Yes.
Maybe pause a moment for me to say something before the next one.
Great.
So just a little bit about that one. I've been asked recently by someone you know, Jen, her name's Tricia Wallanen. She is a clinical psychologist for the US Air Force at their base here. I'm in London, and they're outside here. And she wanted me to offer them something, to facilitate something around Black Lives Matter, around this issue. And as it turns out, I have a wonderful friend who is ex-special operations. In fact, very high up. He's since retired, but very high up. He reported directly to General Petraeus. You might remember he was the one who reported directly to Obama. And I asked him if he had some thoughts about this, and he sent me this particular video as a way to offer that the armed services in particular are really on the forefront to a great degree in this struggle to find out where these biases are and how they can overcome them, because what's most important in the armed services is this issue of trust, especially in special operations, as you might imagine. People really need to trust each other. And so if you're not building that trust, throughout the various levels in something as important as the armed services, it's not going to show up where it really needs to show up. And so they're all about competency. And this, in that sense, it's really about competency. And so just going forward for StudioBE and other companies, some of the companies you're going to work for, this is the theme that you can offer in terms of the importance of this. And just to say one more thing about it, this idea that there are certain things like the Band-Aid, something simple. This is obviously something that's more benign. There are other things that are you know, deliberate and cruel around, let's say, race, but that's a benign one. But the fact that he pointed that out as something that he would look at for weeks and not figure out what the point was. And so this again is the point of having boardrooms, you know, the higher positions, lower positions, all the positions in a corporation or an institution be diverse enough that we can start to get those elements coming together. I remember in a training that I was in at Spirit Rock over 20 years ago, there was a huge breakdown around race. There were about 80 of us in this training. It was going to go on for 2.5 years. This happened about 6 months in. And what I didn't recognize, there were only 4 Asians out of 80 of us. What I hadn't realized as an African American is how much pain the Asians had around the particular kind of racism that was aimed at them. I wouldn't have known that because I didn't have any Asian friends at the time. And I always thought, perhaps as the culture in general thinks, you know, Asians just get it done, they put their heads down, but that's not exactly what's happening. It's something much different. So again, until we have these variations in the culture, whatever the corporate culture is, there won't be enough of an opportunity to transform in the way that this moment is so beautifully and desperately calling for. So with that, Sarah, the second one.
Mm-hmm. One second, let me refresh it.
So if you can't, there it is. Just to feel that. So maybe as you're feeling that, just imagine yourself being Muhammad Ali at that point. This is in our lifetime, my lifetime for sure. So even when we're at our charming best, no seat at certain tables. And then imagine for a moment that you're being asked to go fight a war, let's say, for America. How that would sort of twist you a little bit inside. Yet African Americans did. But you can imagine how you would feel in that scenario. You just won a gold medal for your country, and you come back and you can't even be served in your hometown. How would you feel? I'm just asking you to kind of check in for yourself, how that would make you feel. So there's a kind of cognitive dissonance that goes on there. Okay, Sarah, let's go on to the last one.
Sorry about that. The audio cut out. It doesn't want to
Yeah,
pick.
yeah. No worries. So let's carry on. Okay, so always nice to add a little humor to something that's so so serious right now. And those two men, I think, did that quite well. So one more exercise I'm going to have us do is to just pause right now and to take into your body this sense of Black lives mattering or not. Just see what your own individual relationship to that request is. And don't go where you think you should feel. Just go where you actually land there. And I'm not going to ask anyone to reveal that. This is not what this is about today. But just know what your relationship to that is. If any of you have actual friendships with Black people, you could certainly bring them to mind. That would give it more of a personal thrust, but maybe you don't. In fact, one of the statistics I read, sadly, I don't know, a couple of years back now, said 80% of white households have never had a person of color over for dinner. So that's a lot of not knowing, or rather, it's a lot of knowing someone from a distance, or knowing them from how you're supposed to know them, how you're supposed to think about them, to know them through the media, through music and dance, through sports, but not necessarily as fully fleshed human beings. And so wherever you land on this, part of what's important about what I'm offering today is not to go to guilt or shame. That's not going to be useful for you or the cause. Just in knowing where we land and in knowing how that lands around us, there can be some room for progress, some room for doing something, rather than just feeling bad about something. Okay, so you can all open your eyes and kind of face the screen again. It's weird. It's weird to me. So many of you know I've been here in Europe for the last 3 years, living in London, sometimes in Mallorca. And if any of you got a chance to read the thing that I sent out, the first paragraph, I talked about the difference in the quality of feeling here than in the States. So I was talking about being, if you didn't read it, being in a park. This is a couple of Sundays ago, and just seeing all sorts of people, specifically looking at Black people, kicking balls and riding bikes, and just kind of being in a picnic mood with so many other people, and just looking around. And there's just not the same level of awareness of Black people and the potential for Black people to be dangerous here. And I've checked in with Black friends here around that, and who are in their 50s. And so they've seen a lot, and they said, yeah, that's really true. I myself have driven all over this country, and I've gone into the odd bar in the middle of nowhere, pub, and there's just not the same feeling that I've had in far too many places at far too many times in the States. So there is a qualitative difference in how I experience myself, my nervous system over here as opposed to over there. And you probably feel some of that too, especially now you're being made to feel that, how you feel about that. So I was reflecting on Christine's wonderful interview with Rick Hansen. And he was going over the negativity bias, and he was mentioning the three things that are really important in human nature. And it's safety, it's satisfaction, it's connection, all three of those things. And so if you just think about those three things in terms of how it feels to be an African American, having grown up in America the way it has been, those three things don't connect. We have to find those things for ourselves. We have to create them, but they're not necessarily there in the culture. So even if any one of you don't have those feelings, and perhaps even your parents didn't share those kinds of feelings with you, it's in the air. And my nervous system and others' nervous systems can feel it, especially when we're not in it. So just know, part of the conversation that's still unfortunately being had is this really true? There's some quarters in America that things are great, they're making it up, or yeah, there's some instances, but generally speaking, we've come a long way, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just, my personal experience and the experience of many other African-American friends, my brother, will tell you that's simply not true as an emotional experience of being there. So, good news. So 3 of my best friends are all Brits, and 2 of them live in the States. 1 lives in the south of France. They range in age from their 50s to their 70s, all white, and all remember a time when racism was vicious here. Not vicious in the way it was in America. There were no hoses and dogs and lynchings and so on, but there was a viciousness of mind and heart. And that viciousness was expressed in public, calling people niggers in public and so on. And in 2 generations here, it's made it from that to the experiences I'm walking around having here now, which is so great. And I walk in stores. I have yet to encounter a store I've walked in where I felt that strange vibe that you get, that I still get in America. Who are you? Why are you here? Can you afford being in this store? Well, I'll just share another story that I hope is okay with my daughter, who I think is listening. So she was asked recently, she went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts here, which is why we're even living here in London, graduated. And she had 3 other people of color, half and half, in her class. And so I invited, they were all women. I invited all of them to come over. So it was just the 3 of them and Imani, and to sit and just talk about that experience of being at RADA and what that was like for them. And they started first, all 3 of them. And they all just said, yeah, our parents had some of that stuff. We definitely saw it. But generally speaking, we're good. We're not really experiencing that at the level that we saw them experience, or our grandparents and so on. And then it came to Imani. And before she actually opened her mouth, she started crying. And I had no idea what was going to come out. And she said, my body still goes into shock when I go into stores with Daddy. So I thought I was keeping racism away from her by not focusing on any of that stuff. All the stores I went in, noticing that there was a different kind of treatment, or the person in front of me, the white person in front of me, gives their credit card, no problem. They walk away. Suddenly I need 2 pieces of ID for the same credit card, and so on. So she witnessed all that and internalized all that, and never allowed me to really see that until that moment. So it was a powerful moment for me to also recognize the legacy burdens of racism. That even if she's not having the same experience as I am, that is traumatizing her central nervous system. So the sense of safety with me, even though she's got safety and connection and satisfaction in her relationship to me, when she's out in the world with me, it's a little different. And it's different here than it is in the States. So going forward, since they made that leap here, and it does feel different here, there is this opportunity right now for America to really fess up to how bad this is, how deep this is, how hurtful it is, and how it can be remedied. And I so appreciate the things that you, Jen, and your people are already doing to get busy to try and make that happen, to make boards look more diversified, to offer things to the various companies you're going to be offering things to that also make that look like that, so that this is the work that needs to be done going forward. So get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mhm.
That's the work that we're going to need from you, because where I've been in all over the world, many, many times in many different settings and cultures, where I've been the only one in the room, and not just the only one in the room, the one looked at and to for solace. I know this is in all of us. I know this is deeply in all of us. I'm not talking about racism now. I'm talking about this quality of love and compassion and kindness. And so I know that we all have this capacity to work through this moment, but it's going to be uncomfortable, especially for well-meaning white people, because there is so much anger and frustration and not feeling safe, that sometimes you're going to be in those rooms doing this work, and something's going to erupt and you're going to go, what did I do? And so I would invite you to just settle for a moment. Don't take it upon yourself to do something with that. Just pause and soften. Know what you're dealing with. Know that you're going to make mistakes. Know that there's going to be perhaps a little more anger or frustration with you than is necessary for what you actually said or did. Ask the questions. I know some of the prevailing wisdom right now is don't ask Black people what they think or so on. I don't personally agree with that. I want you, all of you, as part of the position I'm going to offer myself to be in the company, I want all of you to be able to ask those questions that you think are stupid or ignorant or racist. And let's see where we go from there. So we're not going to get anywhere by tiptoeing around this being way too PC. That's not where I want us to go. And it certainly won't get us there as fast as we need to go.
Mhm.
So I guess the last thing is have patience. Have patience. Make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. No big deal. This is part of the human condition, to make mistakes, to have bias, to recognize the bias, apologize, make a mistake. We can do that. So the last bit here is just if there's any questions right now, because I know we're all in busy days, especially you. I'm toward the end of my day, but if there's any questions, comments, whatever, anything is open. Nothing's off the table. I'll give it a minute. And that's, and by the way, if a question or a comment feels risky, so one thing to say is we're all going to need to be a little risky in this effort going forward. I've always said that in our meditation retreats. It requires risk to grow and change. So risk having the embarrassing question. And if it feels too risky, you have permission to write me. And I've got a lot on my plate right now, but I will, I'll try to answer. So a few more moments, and then we'll just. Sorry, I heard someone speak.
Yeah, it's me, Mariah.
Hello, Mariah.
Um, I'll try to keep my emotions at bay.
Don't,
Well,
please don't.
okay. Well, just because I don't want to make this about me, but I'm just realizing how much I feel the injustice of it all, and that is really boiling up for me in the last couple of days. So it's very high on the surface right now. I think my biggest question is, and has been for the last couple of weeks, you know, what do you feel is most effective in terms of, you know, besides what we're doing with StudioBE and all that, and what I'm trying to do with my own students, which are all white, and, you know, not sure how I'm going to change that. But in terms of donating money or becoming a member of NAACP or ACLU, what do you feel is most effective right now?
Honestly, Mariah, I don't know.
You don't know. Okay.
I don't know. Yeah. So what I can say though to that is we had things. You remember the newsletter we sent out around this issue. We had some things to look at. There's a lot of history to learn. There's a lot of history for me to even learn, or should I say unlearn, about how we got here. So I would say that would be most helpful, is learn the history so you have some sense of how America is different from other countries around the world in this way.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm doing for sure.
Yeah. And then, okay, so maybe one more thing to say is, in saying what I said about risking something, extending oneself, getting uncomfortable, and this idea that we all as human beings need to feel safe and connected. When you see a person of color, there's a way for you, you don't have to go out of your way and look like an idiot, but there's a way for you to extend a look, a vibe that creates that awareness that you know what they've gone through. And that in knowing what they've gone through, you don't even have to look at them necessarily, just kind of, you know, sending metta as we do. That's loving kindness for those of you who are not Buddhist. Everybody knows that now, I think, anyway, even if they're not Buddhist. But sending that, just that well wish, that wish for them to be happy and safe and fulfilled. So,
Okay.
yeah. Anyone else? Thanks, Mariah, for the question.
Hi, Tony. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Pronounce your name for me. Yarni?
Bjarni.
Yarni.
Yeah, nice to meet you. And first time speaking to you. And really impressed with the talks and the meetings. The teaching of Jen, who's just great. So this is an uncomfortable one that I want to bring to you. My uncle was a New York City police officer, and he basically raised me. My father died when I was 5. He was the male figure in my life, and he's having a really, really hard time with this. And I know he's not racist. You know, he's a loving man and is not a police officer anymore. But I do know there was a time in his career that he had to shoot, and it was a 13-year-old black boy who was coming at him. I don't think he's ever talked about it more than the one time he revealed it, and he's a very closed person. We had a family Zoom the other day, and you know, we have a pretty spread out family, and my cousin lives in New York City and has 4 kids and was going to the Black Lives Matter rally, and the little girl was showing her beautiful Black Lives Matter banner that she was going to be taking to the city with her family, and I saw my uncle just get up and leave the Zoom. He couldn't face it. It's going to be very uncomfortable to work with him in love. And I think I'm just sharing, and Ty, I don't know if I'm really asking for anything.
Yeah, no, I think I know what's going on. You said you think it's going to be difficult to work with him. I wanted to key in on that. Is that what you said? I heard that right?
Yeah.
Just tell me why you think it's going to be difficult to work with him.
I think that he sees this as an attack on police officers. I think that the problem is in this country right now, I think a lot of people are becoming polarized. And I know in my heart the middle way is the way, and it's not the easy one, it's the uncomfortable one. And I don't think that a lot of people here see things that way, and it's really sad. That's what really hurts me through this. And yeah, so again, I wanted to share it, but I don't even know if I'm asking for anything here.
No, it doesn't sound like you are, but I'm really happy you shared that, because you're sharing something that probably a lot of people that are watching this right now share in some way, shape, or form. So you're not alone in this. And this is that uncomfortability I was talking about. It's going to be uncomfortable to try and present this issue in a different way so that your uncle doesn't feel like somehow it's an attack on the entire idea of policing. And that's unfortunately what too many policemen are doing, is they're feeling as if they are personally attacked, that their responsibility in protecting and serving is being impugned. And of course it is, because we are seeing a lot of it be impugned. But you need to somehow get in there and make him realize he doesn't have to turn away from the way his fellow police officers have behaved. And he would most certainly know, because I've had my issues in New York. The New York Police Department has avowed racist in it and have treated Black people, myself included, in ways that did not merit the scenario. There was no scenario for it to even merit. And so if you can somehow get in there and let him know this is not about him, even though of course it is, that might be a way in for you. And you are our allies in this, because I'm not going to reach him, right? I may one day, but that's going to take you first. And so for everyone who's listening right now, that's the work. That's difficult. And there's going to be pain in that. And so that's also why I say, learn some of the history. Because as I've learned more of the history, because I learned American history the way everyone else did. And so the American history really left out some big, big bites and some big, big reasons for how the Black community ended up being where it is. And so if he's willing, and unfortunately, many of you are going to run into family members who will not be willing. They're not going to go there. And so you'll do what you can in that situation. You'll face that as you come to that, and you'll find what you find in yourself to go around it, to meet it, to bypass it, to even, in the case of some family members on this end, to actually just the need to put them aside. It sounds like you love your uncle, so that's not the thrust of where you're going to go with this, but some others who are listening, that could be the thrust. That could be the healthiest thrust. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else before we bring this
Hi,
to
this is Alex from Skyward.
Hello, Alex.
How's it going? Exceptional talk. Truly, really remarkable how you approach this issue with so much empathy towards everybody. I felt so welcome in the space, and I felt so, like I was learning so much, and it really changed my mind on a lot of things. So thank you. I live in Boulder, which is like pretty much all white. There's maybe,
I know it well.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
Sarah, my wife, went to school there. So.
Oh yeah. So you know well. So I was struck by the statistic that you said about, was it 80% of white people haven't had somebody of color over to their house for dinner? And I was thinking about it and I was like, yeah, I've never had that. And I'm struggling with it because I'm like, I want to bridge that gap in my interpersonal relationships, because I think it's important to have people with different perspectives and all different backgrounds and perspectives, and people of color, people of, you know, different social statuses, socioeconomic statuses and things. And I don't know how to approach that without seeming like I'm going out and purposely making friends who are different than me. You know, I don't want to like target people and be like, oh, I should be friends with you because you are of a certain, you know, type or something, right? And so, unfortunately, with Boulder, it doesn't just happen naturally because it doesn't exist in the, you know, the volumes that you would find somewhere else. So I'm not sure if there's a solution there or something you recommend, but.
So maybe another kind of Black person would answer you differently, but I would answer, go for it.
Okay.
I would appreciate that tremendously. Reach out to me.
Okay.
And just be truthful. I'm reaching out to you because this is a moment in history you haven't been reached out to. Maybe this is a bad idea. Again, this is the part of getting ready to be uncomfortable, because perhaps you will be rejected by one or two or some.
Mm-hmm.
But don't let that stop you, because the rejection would probably just be the hurt.
Yeah. Cool. I'm comfortable with rejection. We have to deal with that all the time in our business anyway. So I think if that is I was surprised that's your recommendation, but if that doesn't feel to you like, you know, I don't want to feel like I'm being patronizing or pandering or anything where I'm just like, oh, I should be friends with you because, you know, I've been told that this is important, right? So if that doesn't come across the way that makes me feel better about, you know, trying to bridge that gap in my life. So thank you.
Okay, so one more thing to say. Even if it's experienced by the person you're moving towards in that way, what our Tibetan teacher likes to say is everything rests on the tip of your motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the motivation there is really important. And that heartfelt motivation will come through in some way. Even if the first one or two Black people reject you, they'll walk away thinking, And if another white person comes up, they're like, this is a conspiracy in the best possible way.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it can only lead to good things if everybody's doing that. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Kate, Ty, and Alex, I wanted to just jump in to this particular topic because it's something I've been doing, intentionally reaching out to women, Black women that I've admired for a long time from afar. Not in my community because I live in a very white community also. But because of social media, we have this different way of connecting. And I realized that everything that we've been talking about, and I didn't realize this, it's been this reconciliation, I think that we're all going through, that this time is really calling for, and acknowledging that we're doing good work. I'm not saying we're not. I'm proud of the work that we do. It's not good enough. We could do better, and we will be. We are. And my job as, you know, a leadership role in this company is to make sure that's happening. So I've been making those connections, and not one person has turned down a conversation. And those conversations have been intimate and deep and extremely uncomfortable and incredibly beautiful.
We're in a moment, Jen. I really feel we're in a moment. And I think all of us, I haven't talked to a single person who doesn't feel that way. So it's, there is more openness now. And I think for Black people, since I'm going to speak for all Black people today, that's a joke. Seeing so many white people in solidarity out in the streets around the world is so incredibly heartening. So we're seeing the moment as it's representing itself with white people right now. So yeah, reach out.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
Oh,
wanted
Who's
to
there?
jump. Hi, I'm Paula.
Hello, Paula.
I went on retreat with
I
you last.
recognize you. Yes, of course. Yes.
I was crying last time I saw you.
I think I remember that.
So thanks to social media, I have discovered that many of the people that we live around and among here in Northeast Pennsylvania, most specifically the people I'm friends with through my son's baseball teams, are flat out racists, and they have no problem posting about it and just, I mean, horrible things. And, you know, clearly I'm going to distance myself from them. However, what is our responsibility in trying to educate them, not on social media, but in person and in conversations and things like that?
That's always an interesting question. The way I like to answer that question is people have to be willing. So one of the things, as I've been asked to enter this conversation, one of the things I sort of put down as a firm baseline is I'm not going to argue if racism is true or not. I'm not going to engage in that argument. And so you will develop your own baseline for where you want to enter the conversation. And if someone's not willing to enter the conversation at that point, if someone says, for example, they're just inferior and they're just a screwed up race, and it's just, if that's where they're going to start with you, I'm not sure you want to spend your loving heart and life energy working with them. There would be other avenues to go out and use your loving heart, your intelligence, your voice. But I'm not sure I'm ever going to decide to address a neo-Nazi audience. Yeah.
Jess?
Hey, first I just want to say thank you so much for including me, Jen. I'm super new and fresh in the company, like really. I just been inspired by what people have been sharing. And so one of the things this is a share really, so one of the things that I've been working with in difficult conversations with what appears to be like subtle racism, so not outward, is just to start with the white supremacy that lives here, and because it's embedded in the culture. And so for me to just start from a place that I think I used to be more comfortable in, like that's a white supremacist or that person's a racist, is not so much working for me anymore, because that's not what's true. What's true is that it's embedded in the culture. And I was thinking of these words that Sebene Selassie, a teacher that I admire, shared, and she said something, they were Krishnamurti's words. You're not thinking your thoughts, you're thinking the culture's thoughts. And I hope I didn't say that wrong. But I listened to that and I was like, okay, so this doesn't excuse the behaviors or encourage passivity or complacency, but it is, there's an element to it that's true. And so as a way to not other people in difficult conversations, specifically people that I might love, I come to the table and just try to notice my body language and see, am I othering in this moment? And am I trying to get out of my own hard work by labeling them a racist and not acknowledging the racism and the white supremacy that lives in this body, being born into this culture? So that's just the sharing. And there are beautiful resources by people in the Black community that are incredibly empathetic and willing to offer some resources like, you know, Me and White Supremacy, the book by Lila Saad. And this is just a workbook, basically, is how I'm understanding it. I'm just at the beginning of it, where you just go through some of the white supremacy that lives in the body. And so anyway, I don't want to take more time, but this is just something I want to share. It's almost like a meditative relational practice that I'm working with inside white supremacy. Great. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for that. Anyone else?
Hi, it's Christine.
Hi, Christine.
There's so much here. This was just such a beautiful teaching. But there was something about the first video that really struck me, and that was the repetition of the term servant leadership. And I haven't thought a lot about servant leadership in a long time. I used to think about it a lot. And we are all, to some degree, servant leaders, in the sense that many of us are tasked with working with others in such a way that we're kind of the guides, gentle guides toward their own awakening, own discovery, own uncovering, whatever it is. But how can we legitimately be that when we can't see? And there was something about the compelling story of, I'm looking at this box of Band-Aids and I cannot figure out what the problem is here. And that really shook me up, that part of the work for me is acknowledging what I don't see. And we must acknowledge what we don't see to really be the servant leader. So I'm going to really think about that more deeply. But again, there are so many things, but I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. It's good. Someone else there?
I'm happy to share. It's Jen. My
Jen?
daughter is using the internet, so it says her name instead of mine. This is more of an observation and a sharing, in part about the complexity of racism and white supremacy, particularly on the unseen adverse effects on even white people. And I think sometimes we don't see that ourselves, the harm of othering. I'm from Alabama. I'm from the deep South. And I have a really complex relationship with family members, some going back decades. I had this uncle, so I have a controversial uncle too, who used to pick me up. I went to school in New Orleans, and he used to pick me up in Atlanta on my way to visit my grandmother in northern Alabama. And it's about a 2.5-hour drive. And he'd spend the entire drive spewing Rush Limbaugh talking points back at me the entire time. Welfare mothers, crack babies, everything that was the thing to talk about in the 90s. And I was so ill-equipped to counter his arguments. I was 18, 19 years old, and I knew what he was saying was wrong and completely ill-informed and hysterical in many ways. And I didn't know how to counter. I just didn't have the mental agility to spar with him. And so I would just get really mad. And these days I don't even talk to him. I have cut relationships with him. And so I think one of the reasons why this came to mind, something that Paula said, and maybe in a little bit of Bjarne's comment, is that at some point I had to realize that this wasn't a person I could reach. And even if it was a person close to me. And so there's that, and just being kind of okay with that discomfort of not having a family member to, and I come from a small family too, so that's hard. The other thing that I've noticed in my own IFS work, some of you are more familiar with IFS than others. When I was really small, I was about 5, I was witness to a terrible beating of a neighbor, of the older brother of my friend. It was a Black family. So she was my friend, and her brother might have been 12 or 13. I think to me, he seemed like a teenager, but when I think about it, looking back, and he was beaten up by the boys from across the street who were white. And I was 5, and I saw this in my front yard, and just just not understanding it and not knowing what was happening. And I'm tracing this back now to my inability to bear witness to some of this stuff I see in the media, because it comes close to an exile for me, and brings up that 5-year-old version of myself that was witnessing something horrific and unable to do anything about it. And then myself being scared because I was not aware that this was a black and white thing. It was just a violence happening in front of my face. And those boys were mean. They were mean to everybody in the neighborhood, but not quite that mean. So I'm not sure how to peel back that work and whether I really need to. Do I need to keep revisiting the violence in order to continue to work on my own internalized system around biases and aversions and so forth? So I'm not, like I said, it's more of a sharing, but I am curious about if I need to capacitate myself to keep witnessing, or if I've seen enough and I'm on board, and I don't need to keep seeing the violence over and over and over again in the news. So so I just share this because we have been impacted. We may not know, we may not always see that, but anytime violence is in the culture, it's negative for everyone in the culture. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Jen. And that's a really good point. It's really, really a tough thing for white people. There's a dehumanizing effect that goes on for white peoples in feeling this way, to be sure. And there's scars in that. And so just to you personally, I assume that you have gone to that little girl from Self with a Big S. This is a little bit of IFS therapy for those of you who do know what that is. Have you actually gone to her and spent some time with her and perhaps even taken her out of whatever that scenario is that she keeps finding herself in?
I have not. I have a session with my person tomorrow, actually. This is a new, it's funny with these IFS memories, you remember them a certain way until you really sit down and you play it through. I've had a lot of memory retrieval in doing IFS work, so it's a recent realization that I'm going to bring tomorrow to my session, actually.
Great. Well, I wish you well with that.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the comment.
Mm-hmm.
And the important point of that.
I've got a quick little share. It's Jake, by the way. Ty, nice to see you.
Hey, Jake. I can't see you yet, but hello.
My camera's not working today, but
okay.
Something I've been contemplating a lot is the concept of psychological warfare. Because when I was 4 years ago, when I was in Baltimore, on the tail end of the last movement of Black Lives Matter and right before Trump's election to presidency, I was deeply affected by that concept of psychological warfare, and I think it may have affected me to the point of insanity for a period. But I just kind of wanted to say that I think, these days we're kind of the frontline medics in this period of psychological warfare, and through all of the things that I've experienced in my own head, all the places that my brain has taken me that I have not wanted to go, I think that meditation and mindfulness has really helped me the most to move on from that. So I want to thank you guys for the work that we do. And I think it's important that we keep doing it. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Jake. That's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Unless someone has anything else to say to that, that's a beautiful note to end on.
Hi, this is Todd. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can. Hey, Todd.
Hello, everyone.
Hey.
I want to just briefly circle back with a share on the point of U.S. history and how it specifically, perhaps, not perhaps, does, in my opinion, impact at least one aspect of a belief or self-righteousness in white culture in the U.S. regarding the history of Black people within the United States. And that was so apparent to me, so clear to me in watching a movie that Ty and Sarah suggested actually that we watch, currently on HBO, called True Justice.
Mm.
If you are not even an HBO subscriber, if you want to do it for a trial, I highly recommend that everyone watch this movie. It's extremely well presented, both from from all kinds of angles. I won't go into detail about it because I want you to just experience it on your own. But for me personally, there was so much history regarding the conscious and many times legal choices presented and put into law, by whites in this country that are, in my opinion, still, and in the community, are still not resolved for all of us. Because unlike other countries in the world that have taken steps for reparation, the United States has not. And when you see this movie, it really clearly presents history that I just wasn't aware of. And it gave me a real window into some of the perspectives held by whites in this country and why they feel justified. This is the way it's been. This is how I feel. It's why I feel it. And I'm not going to change.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Todd.
Todd, thank you for mentioning that. I think it's such a great movie, and I want to just share that I watched it with my niece and nephew and my 12-year-old daughter a couple weeks ago when we were visiting Florida, and it opened up such good dialogue with them at their age. They're 12 and 13. And I think that we have to be talking to our kids, at a very young age, because they've already been impacted. They've already been victims of the biases. And movies like that really cut through and get them thinking and offer so much truth. So, yeah. And lastly, I also wanted to mention that what I've been really reflecting on is, as all of you know, Ty and Sarah are my teachers, and we have a little girl named Rabanne that feels like one of my own now. And when I reflect on the closest Black relationships I have in my life, which are you, Ty, and Rabanne, I can't imagine not having those relationships, and just the growth, the tremendous growth, especially with Rabanne, who's only 14 years old. Just the impact her presence has made in our lives, the way she has enriched our family cannot be I can't put it into words. And so I would like to challenge each of us to continue to invite that in, because it's so important. You're missing out. We're missing out if we're just surrounding ourselves with people just like us. And so I think it's such a good time to do this, connect. Ty, thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with us and your commitment to your work and our work and the work that needs to be done right now.
Here we go.
Mhm.
Here we go.
Hmm. Hi. Thank you all for coming today.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ty. It's wonderful.
And for doing this.
Thank you, guys.